Okay, there we go. This is the first time I've ever gone live on my channel, so big day. Okay, so as I feel like we always do with live streams, we should probably introduce ourselves. I'll go first since it's my channel. I'm Emily. Likes books. If you're here, you might be familiar with my channel already. If not, welcome. So good to meet you. And we're talking about Sense and Sensibility and Ayesha at last today. All very excited to dive in. But Kara, if you want to introduce yourself next.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So my name is Kara. My channel is Wild Book Garden. I'm very excited to be a guest. Thank you guys for having me. I'm always excited to talk about Austen. And this also gave me the reason to reread Ayesha at last, which I also really enjoyed the first time. So really looking forward to it.
Lily, do you want to go?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Lily. My channel is Lily Eleanor Reads. Although I'm not currently making videos right now, but I'm also on Twitter and Instagram at Lily L Reads, somewhere around on those platforms. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this. I reread Sense and Sensibility. This is a read for me, but it had been quite a few years and I didn't remember much about it. And then this was my first time reading Ayesha at last. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about it.
Hi, I'm Elena. My channel is Elena the Great, though I have not uploaded in like 2.5 months. So. I feel like we both went on a hiatus kind of at the same time, impromptu, but that's usually how it happens for BookTube. This was a reread of Sense and Sensibility for me, but I read it, I think, when I was like a sophomore in high school. So it's been a while. But I have seen the movie a couple times since reading it. But like I was familiar with the plot line, and I did watch the movie last weekend. So that is also fresh in my mind. And this was a first time read for me for Ayesha at last. So.
I watched the Sense and Sensibility film for the first time for this.
It's good. The miniseries is really good too.
I really enjoyed it. It was really
good. Yeah. I like both the versions.
I haven't seen it either. I meant to watch it at some point, and then this somehow snuck up on me, even though it's like later than I expected to do the live show. But I did a few years ago when I was living in Minnesota, a local theater did a production of Sense and Sensibility, and I remember really loving it, though clearly nothing stuck with me because when I was reading it, it was like I had never known the story before. I was like, wow, this is also new to me, even though it shouldn't have been. But that makes me want to actually finally watch one of the adaptations.
It's the kind of book where if you asked me to tell you anything about it after reading it years later, like I would have no idea. But when I reread it, I was like, I remember all of this. I did not remember any of it when someone asked me like if I liked the book, what it was about, like years after reading it the first time.
I don't remember anything about it. All I remember was that I had, like, the first time I read it, for some reason, I got the couplings mixed up. Like, I thought different couplings were going to happen. And I was and I remember when I read it this time, I was like, how did I think that? Like, I was reading it, and I was like, it's really well set up. Like, what was my brain doing?
What is it? Mrs. Jennings, who thought that Eleanor was going to end up with Colonel Brandon.
Yeah, maybe I thought that because
you were convinced by her.
But like when I read it, I'm like, no, clearly not.
Yeah. And the brother too is like also convinced. He's like, oh, he loves you, Eleanor, and she's like, he really doesn't. He's like, okay, whatever you say. I know what a man is feeling.
Poor Eleanor spends this whole book trying to convince people to listen to her.
Seriously. Well, I guess we can dive in just talking about Sense and Sensibility. It sounds like I'm the only one who hadn't read it before then. But I definitely really enjoyed it. Similarly with Pride and Prejudice, I like that it's a lot about like the sister like relationships. And I feel like what you're saying, Kara, is like such like an oldest sibling kind of thing. Like they want everyone to like listen to them, but like, and want to like care so much for everybody, but it just like is sometimes, I don't know, like almost futile. What did you guys feel like revisit? So Kara, before we jumped on, was saying it's at least her 4th time rereading, which is amazing. I love that. How does it compare rereading it like to like the first time you all read it?
I think, like, I definitely think that Jane Austen's books lend themselves to rereads like really well. I always pick up on new things or different things, and it's funny because specifically with Sense and Sensibility, there has been a real shift in how I perceive Marianne and Eleanor. Because like the first couple of times I read it, I loathed Marianne. I hated her. I could not stand her. I thought she was so ridiculous and obnoxious. And it wasn't until a few years later that I was like, I think that's because I, like, personality-wise, I would want to be an Eleanor, but I think I'm more similar to Marianne. Like in terms of like the social, like I don't want like I don't want to embarrass anyone, and I care what people think. Like in that way, I'm much more like Eleanor, but in a lot of ways, I'm similar to Marianne, and I was not ready for that kind of self-knowledge. But each successive time I've reread the book, I am struck by how, even though Marianne, she can be very selfish in a way and very set in her ways, like she has such a good heart underneath that, and I like that we get to see that throughout the book. Like we see how even when she's in like the depths of despair, like she's like, well, at least Eleanor's happy because we're doing this, and like that was really nice. And yeah, I agree. The sister relationship is just like a real highlight of this book for me.
So when I first read it, I read it physically, and this time I'm pretty much doing most of all my reads on audiobook for this read along. I don't know why it's ended up that way, but it has. So I listened to the audiobook, which is narrated by Rosamund Pike again, which was really excellent. Would recommend her narrated audiobooks. And I really I feel like I enjoyed it more this time around, and I feel like I enjoyed it more in retrospect. Like at the time I was enjoying it, but I remember being like, it wasn't quite like Pride and Prejudice for me, but I was like, oh no, this is good. Like, but when I'm thinking about it in retrospect, I'm like, there's loads I liked about this. And definitely I felt much more stronger attachment to the characters this time. Like I really loved Eleanor. I think last time I felt kind of just like indifferent. But I really liked Eleanor this time, and I definitely liked Marianne a lot more this time. I remember like not really liking Marianne the first time. I was like, she's young and she's makes mistakes, but like I get it.
Yeah, I feel like I was also the same way with Marianne, and I think this was aided by reading Emma, because the first time I hadn't read Emma before, and I do think that Marianne is actually a pretty similar character to Emma in that, like, yeah, she can be outwardly selfish sometimes, but like deep down, it's because she wants to help people. It doesn't always come across the best way, but like she is a loving person. So I think I understood her character and like her motivations a lot better, and could see her beyond just like the first time I read it, where I was like, wow, she is very dramatic, and like this is a lot. But I also think that in the movie, Kate Winslet does such a good job like capturing her. So I think watching the movie shortly after reading the book in this case also helped with that. And this was like really, I read this one on audiobook this time, and I read it physically the first time. And I don't know if it's just me, but like there's something about listening to Jane Austen audiobooks because I can't visualize a British accent in my head. But when I read it on the audiobook, like it does help me kind of get immersed in like, I don't know, the Regency era kind of vibe.
I agree. I listened to the audiobook as well. Not the Rosamund Pike one. I just got like a random one out from my library, but it was like, it sounded like an older British lady, which it just felt right. It was like kind of Julie Andrews. So
I the same one, because I also had one by an older person. It was a random library one.
Yeah. I was like, this is available.
Yeah. I remember being so shocked the first time I saw Edward's last name spelled out, because I always thought it was Ferris, like Ferris wheel, but it's Ferrers, but they say it Ferris because that's how they pronounce the R's at the end. Like, because
That's so
this is one
funny.
where I saw
Ours
the
don't
movie.
ours don't exist in our British accents.
Yeah, because I had seen the movie actually before I read the book for the first time, so I had all these ideas in my head about how to say character names, and then I read the book and I'm like, what?
I never thought of that. Because I guess audiobooks here just are read in the British accent, so it's fine. But yeah, I can imagine it would be weird, like, yeah, reading it. And I think I would feel weird if I was reading it in an American accent. I'd be like,
I agree with this. I feel like, and I said this about Pride and Prejudice too. Like, I want to reread it. I already know I want to reread them because I feel like the first read through is just kind of like getting the information. And Kara, like you said, just you get something new every time. But that's funny. I also really feel like I relate to Eleanor. And I don't know.
This is also one I think I want to reread after reading some like context about wealth at the time, because obviously like it's a huge plot point with their like family situation and how much money they have. And I feel like you are given like obviously some information, but I'm just missing so much of the context of the time period and like how big of a deal it was to like suddenly have absolutely no money. And also when they talk about like the number of pounds and stuff they have, I'm like, that means nothing to me in terms of like what that actually translates to for wealth. Like what class they, I mean, obviously they still had like a nice home and kind of engaged with like upper class, but they themselves really weren't like kind of at that escalon of society. So it's interesting because they maintain their connections, but don't have the money necessarily to back it up for a lot of interactions, which I think is interesting, but I just need more context.
I like vaguely know, like I don't know like a ton about like what the value is compared to like today's money, but I was actually surprised when I was reading it how little they had. I didn't remember them being like that poor, because like Jane Austen's characters, I'm like, she kind of like, even in Pride and Prejudice, she's like, well, they're not that rich. I'm like, okay, but they're doing all right. Like,
she's got servants.
They're doing all right. So yeah, I was actually surprised when they were saying like the figures. I was like, oh, that's not much money like for that time.
It's like the number of times that they get visited by someone rich and they're like, I just love this cottage, it's so small, and I'm like, they're like, it's so quaint and charming, I wish I had a cottage. And I'm like, I'm sure they wish they had a house.
Literally so many. Was it I'm literally, all the names are blanking on me, but yeah, I remember there's that one specific character that's like, oh my god, this cottage is so nice, I want to buy a cottage, I hate my big house. You can just see Mary being like,
and yeah, I forget who said it too, but they were also like, oh, everybody just thinks that cottages are like whatever, but really the charm here is on that, and just like so like condescending.
Yeah, I think Robert Ferris was one of them, but it was like he just went on and on about like the aesthetic of poverty, and I'm like, Eleanor probably wants to slap you right now. Like.
Right. Very true. I agree. And I see, Carrie, you said you enjoy Mrs. Jennings too. She's like just delightful mother hen. I feel like she's just so kind. I really appreciated her as a character.
I feel like she's the kind of foil to like a Mrs. Bennet kind of character who just wants to marry off her daughters, where she obviously wants to marry them off, but like she does it in a way that's obviously still kind of like the annoying mom vibes, but not as overbearing about it.
Yeah. Just trying to look out for them, do what's best.
I love them in the film. Like, there's that first scene where they go for dinner, like the first dinner that they have at their house, and they're being really like loud. You could just, like, it was oh my god, it was quite. I felt like it really worked in the film. But actually, it was Emma Thompson and Kate Winslet's expressions in that scene that were like.
I thought they were both amazing.
I was really like won over because I think Mrs. Jennings, like early on, it's like I'm reading the book and I'm thinking, oh my god, this would be so embarrassing if like just this old lady will not stop like making fun of you. But like later on, I'm always like really just struck by how as she was only Evie said, like how she takes care of them in London, and especially like when Marianne has her disappointment and how she's like, you know, we won't go anywhere. And also I really love that she instantly was like, we're never going to speak Willoughby's name again. Like, it's very, like, she's really, like, there for protecting them, and she will, like, she really is like a mother hen.
Very much so.
Also, like, inviting them to London and, like, bringing them all to these, like, high society events. Like, again, I feel like I'm missing some of the context, but I feel like that was framed as, like, a big deal for a reason. Like, it was a big opportunity for them that they probably would not have got otherwise to, like, kind of enter that social circle at all. Even before their father died, like, I don't think they would have had the privilege of going to London and, like, entering society, going to those parties and, like, meeting with people unless they had a connection like Mrs. Jennings, who was, like, willing to invite them to her town. So
I feel like more context about just the time that this takes place would definitely enhance it. I also I thought this was really interesting. I was just kind of like reading about the book itself, and apparently it was originally drafted as just letters between Eleanor and Marianne, which I had not heard before, and that's so cool, because I feel like letter writing and just like correspondence in general is a pretty like significant part of the story, and it'd be so interesting to see how that would, I don't know, how it would read as like just letters between the sisters, especially because I feel like they're together for most of the time.
Yeah,
so I wonder what was different.
That's also really interesting, because isn't this Jane Austen's, was this her first book? Yeah.
I think so.
Northanger Abbey was first.
Northanger Abbey, sorry, yeah. So
I think this was the next one.
This was one of her earlier novels, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I just find that interesting that she like wanted to do that as one of her like earliest.
I think it was one that she like wrote, like Emily said, and then she kind of put down and came back to it later. But I'm also curious like how her wealth affected how she wrote the book, because I know that between when she first wrote parts of it and then published it, like her family, I don't think lost a lot of money, but I think either her father got ill or like something happened where like her wealth status changed overnight pretty significantly. I think one of her family members got sick. I forget like the specifics, but I remember watching like a video about kind of how her publication order like changed because of her family's situation and how that altered when this book was published specifically. And I'm wondering if she like changed some of the direness of their wealth situation to like reflect her own. I don't know.
That's really interesting to know, though, because I do feel like wealth and like status within society is such a big theme in all of her books. Like, so like that's like interesting context.
I think they were mostly all published after that happened. So like that's the significant reason why a lot of them talk about money. But I don't know if this one in particular like was more affected because the characters were like already kind of not poor but not well off.
Interesting.
I have to figure out what happened to her family. I'm gonna try to quickly look at it now. I think now I'm like trying to remember, because I remember watching this video about it and being like, oh, that's so interesting. I should try to read the books through this lens. And then I kind of vaguely thought about it, but not really.
Oh, the bit that you brought up, I was literally about to say, right? So when I was reading the book, I was like, okay, I don't dig this, but it was also a thing of the time, like the age gap. But it actually got even more accentuated in the film, because Kate Winslet was like 17 when she did the film, and Alan Rickman was like 45, and I was like,
that's like the thing that stops me from like fully loving this book, because otherwise I would say it's one of my favorites of Austen's novels, but like every time I get to that ending and I'm like, no. It's like, I think personality-wise, I actually think Marianne and Brandon would be a good match, but I'm like, you are a teenager. Like, this is
and also
okay with it.
Liking her because of his like weird history. Kind of, like
it's a little strange. Yes, I remember also just this like side note, but being so confused that both of them were named Eliza. And so, like, trying to keep track of which Eliza he was talking about, like, because they had similar terrible things happen to them, but...
Yeah.
I feel like that's a trend where, like, Jane Austen will have two characters of the same name in a lot of her books. Like, I feel like this happens. I always end up mixing them up every time it happens.
It was, I mean, it was common at the time, like, when you look at historical records, like, people were very creative with their names.
Well, there are like 7 Johns in this one too. I feel like. There were so many different John.
It's a good thing
I had to draw
people
out
with
like
last
a
names.
family tree.
Oh my
Yeah.
I
What
was
did you say,
trying.
Lily?
I really struggled getting my head around when I was reading these first few chapters on audiobook. I listened to them like, I think I went a bit too quickly, to be honest. And I was like trying to wrap my head around like the family tree. And I was like,
Yeah.
I don't know how this all works and who's died and who's related and who's getting the money.
Yes.
When I watched the film, I was like,
Yeah.
okay,
I think part of
It's
the
so
confusion.
confusing initially. I feel like
she just throws you in and she's like, okay, so
Yeah.
here's this situation and they're not getting the money now. You're like, who's related? Like, what?
Yeah. Something I also would find confusing sometimes is how, like, at this time period, they would say, like, instead of sister-in-law, they would say sister.
Yeah.
So they'd be talking about their sister, and they actually meant their half-brother's wife, which was weird. So, like, I mean, I've read this book, like, a few times, and I still, like, at the beginning of the book, I was like, okay, so this guy had this marriage and these children from this marriage, and then he married someone else and had this child, and, like, it was a lot.
Yeah, I definitely think something that I kind of forgot about when I read this for the second time was that the beginning starts like pretty, not even slow, just like straight up confusing. Like even when she like meets Edward at the beginning and stuff, like I think my most vivid memories of the book were actually the film and like them kind of having that bonding. And I kind of forgot that like in the book, we're mostly just told that they have this connection. Like there's not really a lot of scenes between the two of them. We're like, okay, Edward and Eleanor like each other. Yeah. Cool. And then she's pining after him the whole book.
The pacing of the film is like really different to the book. Like I remember watching the film and I was like, it was like 20 minutes, half an hour in, and they hadn't like left their big house, and I was like, okay, like because I do feel like they set up the Edward Eleanor relationship a lot better. Yeah, I guess they were like, we got to get people on and more like.
Right, I know Dan Stevens plays him in the miniseries, which is also nice. I feel like I think this has happened every time I've read this book, but it's like we start out and like you guys said, it's like we're kind of just told, oh yeah, Edward and Eleanor have feelings. It happened off page. Don't worry about it. And every time I've read it, I've been like, oh, okay. And I'm not convinced on their relationship until later when they're having all this drama and like you see like the tension when they end up in the same room with Lucy. Like that kind of thing is what finally starts to sell me on them being together, is like once we see them interact like essentially after they've had to kind of break up, like that's what makes me like, oh okay, I can see you guys have feelings for each other now.
Yeah. I remember reading that scene. I can't, because I did a weird thing where I like was halfway through reading the book and then I decided to watch the film and then I read the rest of the book. So I don't know why I did that, but anyway. But I remember getting to that scene where Lucy, says the whole thing and I was like, oh, like I'd forgotten. I was like, oh my god, like I had a reaction to it, and I was like, I should remember that, but I didn't for whatever reason.
There's like the parts where Lucy is kind of like coyly trying to like get information out of her, and I was watching it with my mom, and I think most of the scenes happen in the book too, and she was like, wow, Lucy's such a snake. I was like, but like she just wants to get, I mean, yes, but like also she's been trying to get married to this guy for like 3 years at this point, so like I get it. Like, she's a little jealous with good reason. That
I think it's the way she says it to Eleanor, like especially in the film. She's like, like she does it in this like really like secretive, like I have something to tell you. It's like,
yeah. I think also in the book it's much clearer that Lucy is deliberately doing everything to hurt Eleanor. Like it's not, because I also, it's like, yeah, it's like she is engaged to this guy. She does kind of have dibs, like, and like here's this upstart who he fell in love with, like at this other house. But yeah, like the thing that always gets me about Lucy is that like every single time she has a conversation with Eleanor, she's like, how can I just twist the knife and like make everything hurt her so much more? And she can't say anything because I swore her to secrecy. Like that's the part that gets me, is like the fact that she doesn't even love Edward. She's just like, I had him first, and that she's like trying to make poor Eleanor hurt like every time she opens her mouth.
I felt
Yeah.
like poor Eleanor this whole book was just like, I can't say stuff because if said I won't say stuff.
No, like that part where Marianne is like, well, I guess you don't have feelings then. And it's like, she does. She just can't tell anyone about them because she's a good person.
That was a really good scene, the payoff scene where she does like kind of have an outburst at Marianne and like they actually like I felt like that scene was really satisfying reading at this time. It was definitely a highlight.
And Marianne was like, oh wait, I like have actually been wrong about a lot of things. And that was like her moment of being like, oh, maybe I have misunderstood everything else too.
There's a lot of miscommunication in this book, but I like don't mind it. Like I feel like Austen does it well. Like
chaos, miscommunication. Like everything can go wrong, Will.
Yeah. And it makes sense why the miscommunication happens, which I think helps, because like Edward, he like had to stay engaged to Lucy, and because it was a secret engagement, he couldn't tell people because that was just like the rules, and then he follows rules. And the same with Eleanor is like, yes, even though today I feel like we'd be like, okay, but you can tell your mom and sister. She was like, no, I'm sworn to secrecy. I can't tell anybody. Yeah, I feel like it's very stressful how like Eleanor and Edward are happy by like the skin of their teeth. Like they barely escape being miserable, and it's I don't know. I wonder if that's supposed to be like a commentary on like how restrictive these like rules were about like engagements and everything, because it's like, yeah, Edward was doing the right thing, but like everyone else in the book is like, he was so young, he could have said that he doesn't want to be engaged to her anymore and it would have been fine. But he's like, no, I must be noble, even if it ruins everyone's lives.
He's still like noble and like, I have to do the right thing. Yeah, the whole hair and
I love this. Also, it's just like
same color hair though is interesting. Like the whole book could have been different if Lucy had a different hair color.
Yeah. Wow. And then Marianne's like, maybe it's your sister's, and he's like, yes, it's my sister. The worst liar.
I love the miscommunication towards the end where they're like, oh, how is Mrs. Ferrers? And he's like,
my
mom is fine.
She's like, no, not your mom. This is Edward Ferrers. And he's like panicked, like, what am I married?
He probably was. Did it happen when I wasn't looking?
The whole like name thing at the end, I was just like, that's the biggest miscommunication, but I had a really good chuckle at it.
It's like so cathartic every time to like, and I think the book and both movie versions did this so well, is like when Eleanor just has to go into another room and like cry, and I'm like so happy that she can finally show people when she's happy.
And you just get, of course, like the great moment where he just stands awkwardly in a doorway where he always looks really awkward and he doesn't know what to do.
He's like fidgeting with something on the mantle, isn't he? He's like, I'm just hanging out.
He does it in every movie and he does it well. I understand.
He does. Yeah.
He captures anxiety extremely well.
Yeah.
We've all been him at some point.
I was amazed to watch the film at the cast. I was like, wait, you and Kate Winslet and Emma Thompson and Alan Rickman and Hugh Grant. I was like,
yeah. What was I?
Yeah. Alan got really like sad towards the end in her inner monologue, and I really liked it. I appreciated it.
I feel like the part with Lucy that just made me laugh was like, wasn't he so sad when he saw you? Like he was like probably just like distraught. That's like because he had to leave me, right? And she was just like, yeah. And like the chapter before, it was only talking about how like happy he was to be there, and it was like, we've never seen him in such spirits, etc., etc. And she's like, he was just so sad, I bet.
Yeah. The part where she's talking, like they all meet Mrs. Ferrers, and she's like a total witch to Eleanor because she's still thinking that she's like the rival, And afterwards, Lucy's like, we're like besties now. And Eleanor's thinking like, yeah, but it's only because she thinks I'm going to marry Edward. Like, she doesn't actually like you. And Lucy just keeps going. She's like, aren't I like her favorite person? And Eleanor's like, yeah, sure. And she's like, no, but we're really good friends.
Yeah.
I feel like Austen's
not
really
quit.
good at that, like, really subtle, like, kind of humor, like, where it's like the characters, I think she's really good at that.
This one I felt was like so cheeky. Like there were so many things like that it was just like kind of subtly like sliding jokes in and everything.
Yeah. Eleanor is so sassy and people just don't notice it because she has such good manners.
I really noticed that this time because I think when I first read it, I thought that Eleanor was like kind of like the boring one, as it were, like the rule, because she went by the rules. But this time I was like, she's really funny.
Yeah.
She is funny. So I don't know, Lily or Elena, if you had the chance to read this, but Kara and I were talking before that she did read the Amish romance retelling. So Kara, I need to hear about it. I'm so curious.
So,
can you read it? Is really the question.
Is it what?
Is it worth reading? Is really the question too.
I had fun with it. Like, I definitely would be open to reading other books like set in an Amish community. I don't know if this author is for me, just because like. I feel like some of the characterization stuff was like, all right, she's clearly relying on us already, like, knowing the characters from Sense and Sensibility. Like, I feel like they were a little bit flat, but, like, I did actually really enjoy learning about the Amish, because, like, I realize I don't know anything about the Amish, except, like, what they say in, like, TV, which is obviously not accurate. Yeah, so, and some of it actually was, like, very clever, I think, how she, like, took the elements of the novel and like put them in this like different setting. Like one of the things I thought was really interesting is so the Colonel Brandon character, like you find out that this like woman in his past who like is Eliza and her daughter Eliza, that like one of the things that separated her from the community is like that she wasn't Amish, or that she like didn't take the like kneeling vows to become Amish later, so like they couldn't, like she wasn't part of the community, which made it like extra scandalous. And then like Willoughby, he actually gets shunned at the end of the novel, which is like a big deal, and like nobody can like talk to him or like acknowledge that he's still like alive, basically. So like that part was really interesting. I think we spent a little too long at the like Norland. Basically, it's not called Norland, but yeah, we spent like a lot of time there. But like, I'm not sad I read it. Like, it was an interesting experience.
It was long. Like, if it had been like 150 pages, I would have like given it a shot. But we looked it up and it was like a full-length novel, and we were like, oh.
yeah. Like it read very quickly. And I also did this weird thing. Like, I was halfway through like Austen's novel, and then I was like, oh yeah, I meant to read that like Amish one. So then I read that, and then I finished the Austen novel. But yeah, like I definitely would want to read. I think like I've heard about a couple of other authors who write Amish stories, and I'm like, I would be down to read some of those. Like, I don't think this one, like, I don't know, just because Eleanor and Marianne are such well-developed characters that I feel like in this one it was kind of like, okay, so she's the one who follows the rules, and Marianne's the one who follows the rules, but is ruder about it. Like, there's like a lot of, yeah.
That's funny.
I don't know what else you guys would like to know about it, but
I'm just so happy to know that
someone read
it exists and someone has read it.
But now I'm curious because it's a whole series. This author
it is, yeah. One thing I will say that I liked that the book did differently is like you actually see scenes between the Colonel Brandon character and Marianne at the end. So like I bought it a lot more, which also the miniseries version does too, which I really like. So that was something. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that probably makes a difference too, because I agree. Like, I didn't fully buy into Marianne and Colonel Brandon thing. Even like, I feel like I didn't even always have a like ridiculous age gap in mind. Like that sometimes like didn't occur to me. I just was like, I don't get it. Like, and I think it's just because we don't see them together, which
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's like we don't see, like, Marianne has started to I guess change or develop by that point, but I don't feel like we get enough of her doing that to see why she would change her mind about him now. Like, yeah. I will say, like, I think that the Amish version, I think Eleanor and Edward made even less sense. Like it was just like so bland. Like I don't even don't really get it. Like I bought it because the plot told me to.
I will say, like, I think the couples in this one, I was like, because I remember when I read it, I was comparing it a lot to Pride and Prejudice the first time, and I was like, well, the couples in here, like, we're like, it's not anything, and I wasn't this time. This time I was like, get it out of your head, like,
yeah.
And I definitely enjoyed it more for that. I still don't think that, you know, Lizzie and Darcy are something else, but
right.
But I definitely did it. I enjoyed them more, but I agree. There's just like, I just want more scenes between both the couples, like between Edward and Eleanor, and also Colonel Brandon and Marianne, because I feel like that's probably where I got confused the first time. Because there's just like,
I feel like we love a good hate to love, and that is kind of Elizabeth romance is in Regency era. So I mean, there's like less tension in any other relationship.
I'll be interested when you guys read Persuasion.
I'm really excited because
that's my other
my best
favorite.
friend told me, like, she's like, we really agree on like romances and books, and she's like, I love Persuasion. She's like, Lily, you will love Persuasion. So I'm quite excited.
Well, and because you've talked about you really love pining, right, Lily? Okay, this is like top tier pining. I'm so excited for you.
I think one thing that stood out when rereading this, though, that has just like annoyed me was the lack of retellings. Considering like there's so much for authors to work with Sense and Sensibility for a retelling compared to Austen's other books, like. How did this not have any retellings other than the Amish one?
I know.
Well, isn't the one who's doing the series of retellings? Aren't they bringing out?
Sonali,
yes. Yeah.
Sonali Dev. I would really like to read.
Yeah.
Which one is it?
I'm frustrated that there aren't any other than that one. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So has been doing a series of like Austen retellings.
Okay. The Persuasion retelling that we're reading in June is Recipe for Persuasion, which is by Sonali Dev, and Pride and Prejudice and Other Flavors is the other one. And then In Sense and Sensibility is going to be the Sense and Sensibility retelling. I think it comes out later this year, which we realized like after the fact, and we didn't want to like push Sense and Sensibility to like the end of the year to get to it, but
murder mystery one where it's Pride and Premeditation, and there's Sense and Second Degree Murder.
I'm excited for those.
So those ones, I actually do want to read them, but when I read the plot synopsis of the first book in the series, the like logistics of the time period doesn't make a lot of sense to me because it's a 17-year-old aspiring lawyer and a lawyer that she falls in love with, and I'm like, so does this mean there's going to be like another weird age gap, but like kind of more apparent because it's a YA book? Like, I don't know. I'm worried with that series, but I will.
Yeah. I'm wondering if. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go on. I
was just gonna say, I'm wondering if it's gonna be one of those where like there's a little bit of time period flavor on it, but you got to go in and not like. You know, which can be fine. Like I can be on board for those. I just like need to prepare.
I know in terms of historical fiction, there's some historical fiction I read and I'm like, I'm like, I don't know. This feels very contemporary.
Yeah.
There's no cell phones, but other than that,
yeah.
Oh, this makes me excited. I did read Persuasion before, and I'm so excited to actually get to like reread it because, like I said, I feel like it's gonna make a difference. So Evie, that's so good to hear. And then yes, I definitely want to read. I'm excited to read Sonali Dev's books in general because I've heard incredible things. So that's exciting.
I'm trying to debate whether or not I should read Pride and Prejudice and Other Flavors like this month in anticipation for, because I mean it's like technically a series, but it's kind of like, I don't know, kind of like how the Talia Hibbert's like Eve or the Brown Sisters series, like they're all companions, like you don't have to read them in order. So I feel like though I do still like reading those series in order, so we'll see if I end up getting to that one before.
Yeah, I didn't realize I thought it was just like a series in that they were all Austen retellings. I didn't realize they were connected.
I'm pretty sure like the characters kind of appear across books. There's probably characters who were introduced in the first book who appear in the second book who you would obviously like know who they were if you read the first one, and they're probably just like random side characters. But I always like the Easter eggs.
Yeah.
So
agreed. Yeah. All right. Any other thoughts on Sense and Sensibility before we talk about Ayesha at last?
I think Willoughby is the worst Austen villain, and that's all I'm going to say. I would like him to get hit by a carriage, please.
I had forgotten how awful he was, and I was like, actually,
oh my god, yeah. I don't want to like slow anything down, but I just wanted to say that his like apology. Hi baby. His apology when he's like, well, she was 15, but she was really stupid, so she kind of like deserved it. And I'm like, please just. Yeah.
And yes, Talia Hibbert is doing.
I saw
that.
that.
Oh my gosh. Maybe I have to pick up Talia Hibbert now.
Well, the name sounds something vaguely Bridgerton-esque. The name of the series, I forget. It's like sounds like some like estate name is the name of the series.
Right.
But I don't know if it's like set in modern day or if it's kind of different time period. I don't know.
Yeah.
Skybriar. I think it's the Skybriar series about the Montrose family. I don't know. It's contemporary though.
Okay. Exciting. All right. So Ayesha at last. So if anyone who's watching hasn't read this one, we are going to talk in some spoilers. Obviously, it's a Pride and Prejudice retelling, so there are some spoilers that you'll be aware of just knowing Pride and Prejudice. But I will agree. I think Elena was saying this earlier, that there were a lot more like twists and turns than I expected.
I feel like this was like a loose, like I feel like Pride that we read in February was like a really strict retelling of Pride and Prejudice. I felt like this one was like a slightly looser one.
This was like inspired by, but kind of
agree
with some of the plot points, but most of them were not.
Like there was that one scene that was very specifically. I mean, should I say it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The proposal scene was very specifically.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. I feel like you could read this and have no idea that it was a Pride and Prejudice retelling or inspired by it. Knowing it, there are like certain things that like kind of stand out, but you definitely, like you were saying with the Amish retelling, it like relies on your prior knowledge of the story. I feel like this one does not at all. Like you can read this anytime.
I mean, there's even references to how much Ayesha likes Pride and Prejudice. So I that was kind of like the hint, like, oh, if you haven't picked up on it yet, there are some elements here, but you don't need to. Which I feel like most of the way that it was weaved in was kind of like subtle. And then there were like some of the bigger things, like Lily said, like the proposal scene, which was like trying to be a little bit too similar to Pride and Prejudice. Hearing that everything else in the book was like loosely, because I was like, really direct.
Yeah, it like it really threw me because everything else was so like loose, and then like that one, it was like literally like she just translated it into like into the context of that book and was like,
Well, and especially because I think at that point, Khalid, like I thought he had developed past that kind of thing, you know, but
it did seem a little out of character.
Yeah, like maybe at the beginning of the book he would have done that, but I didn't think by this point he would have.
I feel like the only other thing that was like more or less spot on was the cousin and the guy she ran away with. Like that felt very. What was that?
I think his name was Tariq, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that seems
yeah.
right.
Audiobook, like really quickly. They said his name really quickly, but yeah, I think is it Tariq?
Yeah.
It came up earlier because they were working on the mosque thing together.
Yeah.
But then he kind of disappeared for a bit and then like came back towards the end. So I remembered him as a character, but his name like eludes. But I'm pretty
Yeah.
I only like finished listening to it.
Yeah.
I realized we had an hour left, and I was like, oh.
What are people's like overall impressions on like if you like liked it and stuff?
I feel like I liked parts of it. I did like Ayesha, and I liked her like independence and her like I don't know. I feel like she had a lot of like strength in her personality, and I really enjoyed her as a character. I thought, and I think Elena, you said this on the Discord, there were so many plot points. I feel like there's so much happening that I found it sometimes hard to keep track of. And I also felt like there were like 3 different villains or like bad guys that you're supposed to hate, which it didn't feel like, I don't know, that you don't really get that in Pride and Prejudice. So I was surprised by that.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, this is my second time reading it, but the first time was like a few years ago. And I didn't remember too much from it. And I really liked it this time. I really like Khalid's character arc and how it's like, you can see even from the beginning, like he's not a bad person. He just like, he makes assumptions about people, and he's so used to people judging him that I think he kind of like uses that to gauge like other people. Like we see that with the way he judges Ayesha because she's sitting in a bar. But I think that like he and Ayesha, I think they had really good chemistry, and that like is one of the things that really I think made this book work for me is like that scene where they're cooking together is so good, and like they don't do anything, but it's just like really well written. And then I also like I agree about the plot. That was one of the only things that I was kind of like, there's a lot going on. I feel like some of the stuff, especially at the beginning and the end, felt kind of messy. Like I feel like we got introduced to too many things at the beginning, and I feel like at the end it was like, oh, we gotta like wrap everything up like right now. But I did like some of the books, like some of the ideas that the book handled. Like one of the things I thought was really good is I think the book does a good job of showing the difference between like an arranged marriage and like a forced marriage, because I feel like in Western media like we tend to conflate those two things, and that's not always how it is. Like that's not always the case. So I did like a lot of things about the book, but yeah, the plot kind of was uneven for me.
When I'm thinking back on it now, because I read it in like a lot of little chunks over like almost a month, so like it didn't feel too overwhelming, I guess, as I read it. But I like when I'm looking back on it, I'm like, there was so much going on.
So much happens.
Like, I was thinking about the main plot, and I was like, and then there was that side bit where like Amir was homeless and like Callie was kind of like, and I was like, okay. And all the stuff with Khalid's sister, like that was a whole thing, especially like became really important at the end. But I think I really liked the book overall. Like I did really enjoy it. I listened to the audiobook again. I can't remember who the narrator was, but she was very good. And she really brought it to life, I feel like, a lot of the characters. And although it was a lot of plot, I didn't find it hard to keep track of it. Like I didn't get confused at any point. And yeah, I liked a lot of the cast of characters overall, and I liked a lot of the character journeys. I do think like there was like a bit with the whole bit with like Ayesha like and her dad and her mum. Like I felt like that was kind of like thrown in there, and I felt like I need it. Like I don't know, but I just remember it just like came out of nowhere, like all the backstory with her dad, and I was like, okay, we're doing this now. Okay. A lot going on.
I also really liked it, but I said in Discord that there was like so many plot points, and I thought all of them on their own like were all interesting. Like I was curious enough about what was going to happen with all of them, where I liked reading because I wanted to know what was going to happen next. And the audiobook, like Lily said, is really good. And I thought that the narrator did a good job of like keeping it from being too confusing for me even during those times. But there were still points where I was like, some of these individual plot lines were because there were so many of them, like weren't explored to the best extent they could be. Like I think about the workplace one with Sheila, the boss, and it came up at the beginning when she like just started at the company, was being really rude to him and discriminating against him, and then it came up at the end. But in the whole middle of the book, there wasn't really any mention other than the lingerie business that she like sent him to make him uncomfortable, and that was it. And I was like, well, obviously this is a really important plot line, and I'm glad that it's here and talking about like being able to talk about workplace discrimination and that sort of thing. But at the same time, I feel like because there were so many other things happening, the author couldn't really explore it in a way that like it might have made it cohesive throughout the whole story. So that was like the best example I can think of for when that happened in here. But I feel like that was the case with like a lot of these smaller plot points. And I still enjoyed reading with them because I wanted to know what Khalid and Ayesha were gonna do about a lot of these like things that were happening. But at the same time, I was like, I kind of wish we got more. When I think about it, the book is also like, I don't know how long my audiobook was, maybe 7 or 8 hours. Like, it wasn't that long.
It was like 10 hours, I think. It was like 10 hours.
Yeah, I was like, she could have, I mean, I don't always advocate for making the book longer, but she could have made the book longer, I think, to resolve
it didn't feel super long. Like, I wouldn't have been mad if some stuff had been expanded. Like, and then things keep coming back to me. I'm like, and there was a whole plot line with the mosque and like the money with the, like.
Yeah. Like, it's like, has he been scamming other mosques, or like was he just like he did this one because he wanted to get back at Khalid? But I'm like, he seems sketchy. So has he been doing this before? Yeah.
Well, he's clearly sketchy because he has also the website. Like
yes, which like okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Emily, and I'll go.
No, I feel like the one thing I was going to say too is just the author's so good at the characterization of everybody. Like I fully bought into like they all felt very like fully fleshed out, including like I agree, like he just like seemed smarmy and really sketchy like from the start. But I feel like that was definitely like a huge strength. Like if not one of my favorite parts is she was just like so good at figuring out those characters and the motivations and everything to like she knew exactly what she wanted to make you feel about each of them and did it so well without making it feel like I'm gonna make you feel this way about this character.
Really, and her characterization was excellent. Like I felt like as soon as a character walked on the page, I felt like they were a three-dimensional. Like I felt like I knew them and I knew what they were about. And there were a lot of characters. Like there was a lot of characters to keep straight. But, like, I felt like I really knew who they were. I really liked Ayesha's grandparents.
Me too.
Hanana, I really liked him. He was great.
Her grandparents I really enjoyed, and like you guys were saying, like she's so good at characterization that I feel like sometimes with some of the minor characters, it's like then she try and like not like change them later on, but like for like Amir, for example, I did not like him at all, and I feel like we were supposed to like him more than I did. And I'm like, okay, like I do feel bad for him. He's going through this like horrible situation. Like he's struggling to like find somewhere to sleep. But I'm like, you were watching exploitation porn. Like that's not great.
And he also on your friend's computer.
So like that was really weird to me. Like there were a couple of side characters where I feel like Uzma Jalaluddin did such a good job selling me on them not being great that then when they tried to redeem them later, I was like, I don't think so. Like this, it kind of happened with Hafsa a little bit too. Like I know that her and Ayesha kind of make up, but I'm like, I think she needed to grovel more, and she did not.
I agree with Hafsa as well. And also, like, just another plot point that I remembered. Like, I found the ending really funny in terms of. Was it with Ayesha like trying to like her friend like setting up the rishta for her friend? And I was like, because that was like a thing early on. It's like set up with her friend like wants to get married and her boyfriend won't propose, and then I feel like it comes up like once or twice again, and then it's just like it's a big thing at the end, and I was like, okay,
I do think this would make a really entertaining like movie or TV show that was so dramatic. Like there's so much that goes on where I feel like I would have less of a problem on the like because I feel like I'm more used to movies lacking any development for plot twists, and when they happen, I'm just like, cool, all right. Here I'm like I expect a little bit of foreshadowing and like. even spacing, but I think this would be really entertaining on screen just to have like, bam, plot twist, bam.
Yeah.
It was really cinematic to me listening to the audiobook. I would like love a film or like a mini series or something. I think it would be so fun.
Yeah, I think so too.
This comment, I kept trying to explain the plot of this book to Adam, and I'd be like, oh, and then this is happening too, and like X, Y, and Z. And he was like, this is one book you're reading? I was like, yeah, can you believe it? It is drama.
Yeah.
I really enjoy. I felt like there was always something going on. Like I felt like the pacing was really good. Like I was always, like every chapter had something. Because I listened to it in such small increments, and that can get boring with some audiobooks. But this one I felt like was really fun because every chapter I'd be like, oh, something's happening.
Like this is a good get out of a reading slump kind of book because it's like there's just so much going on. Like you can't not get to the end. Like
right.
I can attest to that because I am struggling to finish anything right now, and this was fine. Like I didn't struggle to finish this. I'm in a massive reading slump right now, and I finished it. So
it takes me a while to get through some audiobooks because like I'll stop and start them when I'm working, but like I actually took time out of my day to deliberately listen to this one. Like, usually I just do it when I'm doing other activities. So I was like, that's the sign that you want to keep
doing. And I would listen to this while I was getting ready for like work in the morning, which I normally just like put on some music. But this one I was like, no, I'm going to listen to my audiobook while I
I didn't know. I'm not much of a Shakespeare or like classic literature person.
I picked up on the Shakespeare a lot more than any Austen. Like I felt like when I was reading it, I was like, I get all the Shakespeare stuff in here, but I think maybe because I wasn't paying attention, and I'm less familiar with Austen. Or like I felt like the Shakespeare stuff was like a lot more like they were like, this is Shakespeare. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I like because I read it physically, and my edition actually has like a list of all of the Shakespeare references in the back, which is really cool. And I'm a big Shakespeare fan, so I really enjoyed that. I loved that her grandfather was like a Shakespeare scholar.
Oh, right, duh. I forgot another plot line that I just.
I think what's interesting is that like when I was looking at this book, I think for the first time, I saw that it's like actually taught in a lot of schools, which I think is interesting. I don't know if it was like something that was kind of done as part of like, because it's published in Canada, like a Canada Reads kind of thing, because I think it's mostly read in Canadian schools. But I'm wondering if you have like an edition that lists some of the Shakespeare parts because it might have been like deliberately printed that way so that it's better taught. Because I know that like sometimes some books are like published with the aim in mind of being like classroom oriented,
right? Or like book clubs, they'll have like a discussion guide in the back. It is.
I realized this was taught in school. Like this is taught in a lot of schools. That's really cool, though.
Yeah, I don't know the content. I think it must have been as part of like a very specific kind of thing. I forget where I saw it, but I also remember seeing it on a table at my local used bookstore for like books in the local area that were either being like taught at schools or must have been featured at book clubs. It was like on a table with some other stuff that I was like kind of surprised was taught in school. So I don't know if it was like I don't know if you all had this where you might have had like summer reading and you kind of had some more fun options to choose in like high school stuff, and you still had to write a paper on them, but they were like a little bit different from your traditional classroom. So that might have been what this was.
That's cool though. In British schools, at least when I was at school, it was just classics. You didn't get anything fun.
I'm realizing I really lucked out. One of the only benefits of my AP classes is we did not have to do that summer reading thing. They worked us miserably the rest of the year, but at least they didn't have us.
My summer reading for AP was the most boring, but all the other years was like we had a list of like maybe 10 books to choose from, and there were definitely some classics on there. But I remember even in middle school, I got to read Ella Enchanted for one of my summer reading books.
I love that book.
Ella Enchanted one year, and then I think another year I got to read Just Ella, which is another Cinderella like middle grade kind of YA thing. So I
cool.
for some of the summer readings.
I had like one class where I remember, so we had to like write a paper, and they said we could pick the books, and I remember like it was 2013, and like one of the like things was dystopian, and I was like, can I please write about the Hunger Games? And she was like, no. I was like, you said I could pick whatever book I wanted. She was like, no, you have to pick like a classic. And I was like,
Hunger Games is a modern classic. You should have
because now it's a modern classic. So, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
And you could definitely write a killer paper on the Hunger Games.
I still wrote a good paper, but like I'm like, can you imagine the paper I could have written?
Yeah.
I'd love to read it. Kara was also telling me that Uzma Jalaluddin just came out with a new book last month as well. And I feel like
I definitely like to read more from them.
This conversation definitely makes me more interested in like picking up more, just like remembering all the like good like character points and you know, it was well
done.
done.
What I find interesting is that I think her other book is not a retelling, but it's also inspired by it's either You've Got Mail or it might be Bridget Jones' Diary.
It's You've Got Mail. Yeah. So I read it. It just came out last month and I did really enjoy it. It's interesting because I was telling Emily, like, I just happened to finish my reread of Ayesha at last, like right before I read, a buddy read Hana Khan Carries On with a Friend. And it was so interesting. Like, I try not to compare authors' books to each other, but it was hard not to because I read them right next to each other. And a lot of like writing things, I think she did even better in her second book. Like, I think the plot is a lot smoother. I think the thematic elements were handled like much more completely. Like, I think there's some great like topics it deals with. I really loved the main character, but the thing that didn't work for me in this one was the romance, which is like kind of a big element of it. So it was very interesting. Like, I would still definitely recommend it. And like from reviews I've seen, I think the romance worked for a lot of other people. It just like wasn't my favorite. Which also, I'm not the biggest fan of You Got Mail, so maybe that is part of it too. But yeah, it was very interesting. Like, I definitely recommend the book, and I would be very curious, since we've all read Ayesha at last now, I'd be like really curious to see what you think of her other novel.
I've not actually seen You've Got Mail, but I know the premise.
I've only seen it once, and it was so long ago that like I couldn't tell you anything about it other than like it exists.
I like the thing it's based on, but I don't. Yeah, it's not like one of my favorite rom-coms or anything.
Yeah. Also, yes, I love this.
I feel like, that's not happening as much over here in the UK because like I just started tutoring, like online tutoring, and I'm tutoring in English, and the person I'm tutoring, the course, I like looked up the course like to really like, set up my resources, and it's like still the same stuff I was doing at school like 10 years ago. I was like, I feel like okay.
Yeah, and like this book club is such a good example of how like you can incorporate newer texts as well, and like like there's actually like some modern books that like handle like themes of classics, and I feel like those would be so great to read in conjunction, and it's like there's some great opportunities here if you like.
I think reading retelling books in classes would be like a really good idea because it's a good way of engaging them in the story and the themes, but without language and like the distance of history and everything.
Like I've read a retelling of Antigone by Sophocles, it's called Antigona Gonzalez, and it's brilliant, and it's like it would be so interesting to talk about it in a class, and like it's like there's a lot of ways that like schools could incorporate like newer stories without just like throwing everything out. It's like you can use both, just like don't.
I feel like for me sometimes it's easier to read or watch like a retelling or adaptation before the classic anyway, because like, and definitely in high school I did not pick up on a lot of like the themes, or it just didn't like work as well for me, and so I often just didn't care.
It's like Shakespeare. Like I find like once I've seen a film or I've seen like a play or whatever of Shakespeare, I'm much better. Like I'm like, okay, now I understand what's going on. Whereas when you just read it, it's like, what is happening?
We read a little Shakespeare in high school, and it was not taught in a good way that was like gonna get anybody interested. Like I wasn't interested until I got to college, and we actually started like teaching it in a way that was interesting. And the nice thing about seeing it performed is like if the actors are good, you'll know what's going on even if you can't like translate word for word what's happening. Whereas like if you're reading it, you kind of don't have a choice. So
Yeah. I remember we did 12th night when I was in the equivalent of junior year, and we were like, can we please watch She's the Man?
yeah,
I love that movie.
And she was like, no. And we were like, why not? It's a good retelling. And so she made us watch the film, which was fine because it was like Helena Bonham Carter. It's a
good movie. I like
the movie, but I just like when I think back on it, I'm like, she should have let us watch She's the Man because like it would have been.
It's like
a good retelling, though.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I was just gonna say I rewatched She's the Man like less than 6 months ago, and it holds up. So
yeah,
I watched it like recently, and I was like, I didn't realize how close it was to 12th Night.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. I watched it before I read 12th Night, and then I was like, oh, it's really close.
Yeah. Well, and circling back to Jane Austen, but if you guys have seen Bride and Prejudice, which is like the Bollywood adaptation, it's so good, and it's such a smart adaptation. They like because it's set in modern day, and like instead of class, it's like a commentary on like new colonialism and everything. And like there's some parts that are not perfect. Like I think the casting of Darcy could have been a little better, but it's such a fun movie, and the music is a great time. And also, it's by the director of Bend It Like Beckham, which is one of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a good one.
I've heard. I think I saw someone did a video where they watched like all the Pride and Prejudice adaptations at some point, and like one of their top picks was Bride and Prejudice.
It's good.
Yeah. I definitely think when it comes to like Jane Austen in particular, because there's like a lot of subtle humor and like just like context things that you might not pick up on, especially like I guess if you're younger and in high school, like this is maybe the first time you've ever read a book that has this style of writing. And I always find that retellings are a good retelling brings out the even if the plot points aren't the same, like it brings out the integrity of the vibe and the points that the author was trying to make originally, and like bring them into a new kind of light. Like we talked about this 2 months ago, but like when we read Pride, I felt like it kind of it even though it's very different to some of the plot points than Pride and Prejudice, just in terms of where it's set, it held up the kind of energy of the book. Like I guess what it was going for was obviously different themes, but the themes make sense translated modern day. Like instead of talking about class, it was talking a lot about like class, but in the context of gentrification. So translating it over.
And I think that's I totally agree, and I think that's why you can have an adaptation like Bride and Prejudice that's like it's set in a different time period, it's set in a different country, they change a lot of plot points like in the story, but it feels so close to the novel because like the director like kind of intensified like the core themes, like she changed the setting, but it's still about class. It's just now about class in the context of like American and British colonialism in India, like
good adaptations and retellings are such fun. It's
I'm realizing how much I enjoy retellings like through this like I've been really enjoying the retellings we've read so far.
I feel like usually when people talk about retellings on BookTube, the focus is fairy tale retellings and like I love a good fairy tale retelling, but I definitely think they're a little bit harder to pull off successfully because they rely less on themes usually. Like they're usually kind of the way people translate them is through the mythology. So if it's like Beauty and the Beast, like you need your beast creature, and like, I mean that's kind of the base of it. I mean, obviously you have the like falling in love with someone who like looks a little different maybe, but like generally I feel like authors usually focus on the actual plot points instead of the themes. And when it comes to adapting a classic novel and retelling a classic novel, you usually have to focus more on the themes because that is generally like what the author is pushing forward more than any plot point.
And I think Austen as well works well for retellings because like her themes are always so strong and like clear. And
very adaptable though. They're like timely. They don't really disappear. Like talking about class isn't irrelevant to our time period.
Yeah, and even like some of the little things, like one of my favorite lines in Sense and Sensibility is like when Eleanor is just standing there listening to Robert Ferrars go on and on about, I don't know if it's about like his toothpick case or like his like thing for cottages or whatever, but it's like Eleanor agreed with everything he said because she did not think he deserved the compliment of rational opposition. And I like love that. And I'm like, we have all been in that situation where we're talking to this guy and you're like, I'm not going to argue with you because I value my time too much. And you're like, and then you like leave.
Yes.
Yeah.
Spot on. I know. That part is just like Eleanor's whole outlook on him as like a just like ridiculous human being. She's like, he's just not worth my time.
What a clown, yeah. Like the toothpick case
relatable.
For, like 3 pages.
Emma Thompson did her so well. Like when I found out that casting, I was like, oh my god, I love Emma Thompson.
She's great. So great.
Now I want to watch the miniseries too.
It's really good.
I didn't realize, like, for some reason I thought it was a miniseries, and then I was like, oh no, this is a movie. But I know there is a miniseries that I would like to watch. I need to watch the Pride and Prejudice miniseries as well.
I finally watched it, which I know, like, in the world of Austen is like, oh, I can't believe you finally watched it. But I just am too attached to the movie. But I did like it. I
need to get through the first episode because I found the first episode was just like really slow.
I love the miniseries. I do not like the movie.
That's sad.
That's funny.
Did you watch the miniseries first?
What's that?
Did you watch the miniseries first and then watch the movie?
I did, and like that can definitely be part of it. But yeah, that's true. It could be like a loyalty to the one you saw first thing, but yeah, I
watched the movie first. But I will say that I think it's partly just I think it's also like when I watched the movie, like I hadn't read the book in a while, so I'd forgotten a lot of what was in the book. So I was like the series is a lot closer, and I was like, to be honest, I was just having a good time with the vibes.
Yeah.
I do like the awkward moment when Colin Firth comes out of the pond and is like basically naked.
I have to say, like I was raised. Like, I haven't seen the miniseries, but, like, I was raised by my mother who loved that miniseries, and, like, I knew about that scene from about the age of 7. Like, it's vivid. There's a film, I don't know if you guys would know it, there's a film in the UK called Citrinians, which is, like, about this, like, boarding school. Anyway, it's, like, it riffs on a lot of different things, but Colin Firth is in it, and there is a scene where he falls into a fountain and then he comes out and his name's not Mr. Darcy, but his love interest dog is called Mr. Darcy. And like there's like it really riffs on it, and like he comes out in slow-mo, like with his shirt wet. Like, I remember watching it with my mom and she was like, oh my god, it's like Pride and Prejudice.
That's hysterical. Oh my god.
So funny.
Yeah. It's like one thing that is not accurate to the book that people eat it.
Yeah.
It's
what it's most known for. Like that scene,
it's so funny though, because like the level of scandal that would have been is like up there.
I know.
Yeah. Well, you can tell from the way like Lizzie's like talking to him. She's like, yeah, we came early. Oh my god.
Yeah.
I might be able to see your chest a little bit through your shirt, which is now vaguely see-through from you being in a pond.
Yeah. I know. I think like one of the things that I love about the miniseries is that it is understated like the novels are. Like, but yeah.
I think I was comparing it too much to the film when I started watching it. I think I just need to go in it with the film completely out of my head.
Yeah. I think of them as like very different like stories that they're telling. They added a scene for the American release at the end that is just like so embarrassing to watch.
No, I hate the film. I turn it off. Like
it's so bad, and I'm like, this is what they think the American audience wants, and I'm ashamed for us. Like,
I didn't realize it was in there. Like, because
it's so bad. It's so bad.
I watched the British one that's like repressed, and they're like, you guys can't deal with lovey-dovey stuff, so we're gonna cut it off. And then someone showed it to me, and I was like,
oh my god, it's.
When they added the I mean it was removed from Netflix, but when they added it to Netflix, I don't think that scene was in the Netflix version.
They've thought better of it. That's good.
Yeah.
I don't know if they just like uploaded the British version to them.
Yeah.
I just find it funny that they would have shot the scene like it's like they shot the scene like this is for the American release. It's like yeah. I found out like for a few different films that they'll shoot like another scene or they'll shoot scenes differently for the American release. I'm like, okay.
It's really weird, especially because like obviously the people usually doing that are like studios in other countries, so it's not even like this is what the American audience wants. It's like this is what we think they want. Like,
Yeah.
Oof, rough. Well, I feel like now I need to go spend my night watching Jane Austen adaptations or something.
I know.
yeah.
This is so good. Any final like thoughts about Sense and Sensibility? I know we've been on for over an hour now and want to be aware of everybody's time and everybody who's watching, but any last thoughts we want to share?
Did you guys catch the duel in Sense and Sensibility?
Yes.
So weird.
I forget what I remember being aware of it, but now I can't. I forget.
That was something that I did not notice the first couple times, and it like blew my mind when it's like Colonel Brandon is talking to Eleanor, and he's like, "By the way, I challenge Willoughby to a duel." But like that happened.
Okay, I remember that.
That's when he disappears.
Yeah. I read this like I read it over a month ago, so like my memory of it is hazy.
Yeah.
I do remember that. It was very like subtle. Yeah.
I thought that it was so weird. Like I didn't even catch it the first few times, and then one of the adaptations shows a like small part of that, and every time I would see it, I'd be like, "Why did they put a duel in this movie?" And then I read the book, and I'm like, "Oh, it's because they actually had a duel."
Yeah, that is shocking. I forgot about that.
It's weird.
Well, thanks to everybody who joined in reading. Thank you three all again for joining in and chatting. And thank you to Minnie for continuing to interrupt me. Really a delight. I'm excited for Persuasion. I feel like so many people say they love Persuasion, and again, really jazzed to dive into Sonali Dev. So we'll be back with another live show in June. And look forward to I'll be on Lily's channel. Sorry, I just like choked on air. Anyway, on that note, thanks everybody again, and we will see you live in June, but also links to everything down below, as well as join the Discord if you want to chat along the way, or find us on Twitter, etc. We'll chat Persuasion.
I'm less slumpy too, so I will be actively commenting on these books in the Discord over the next
Same.
I will try and
I
will try and be a bit more active on Discord. I feel like especially April, I took a break from videos officially, and then I just like completely just like haven't been reading, haven't been doing anything.
Yeah, same. April was rough.
I went back to work, which I think has just like thrown me.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah. So here we are all committing. I agree. Yeah. But yeah, look forward to chatting with you all very soon as we move into book number, what is it? 5. Yay. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.